The room was packed long before the show even began. People from around town filled the rows, chatting loudly, laughing, and waving to familiar faces. The stage lights warmed the air, giving everything a soft glow that made even the peeling paint on the walls look a little magical. In the front row, a group of teenagers whispered among themselves, pointing at the list of performers taped to the stage curtain. No one noticed the young woman standing behind it, clutching her fingers so tightly they had turned pale. Her name was Lena, and she had never stood on a stage like this in her life. She wasn't dressed to impress. She simply wore a loose blue dress she bought from a small thrift shop 2 years ago. It wasn't stylish or modern, but it was clean and comfortable, and that was all she could afford. Her shoes were old, the kind that squeaked a little when she walked, and she kept her eyes down, hoping no one would stare too long. While the host announced the next act, Lena tried to focus on her breathing. She repeated the same words she had whispered to herself backstage for the past 10 minutes. Just breathe. One step at a time. But her chest felt tight. Her heart kept racing faster than she could calm it. Every time the audience cheered for the performer before her, she felt smaller. She wasn't used to crowds. Most of her days were quiet. She worked at a small market stocking shelves, and the customers rarely did more than give her a polite nod. She liked the silence, or at least she told herself she did. But deep down, she knew she was hiding. She had always been the girl who blended in with the background, someone others easily forgot. Her talent, the thing she kept closest to her heart, was something she never showed to anyone except her father. When he was alive, she would sing softly for him while he rested, and he would smile with gentle pride. He always said, "Your voice has something, Lina. It feels like sunlight." She held those words tightly, especially after he was gone. Tonight, she wanted to honor him. But wanting something and believing you can do it were two very different things. From behind the curtain, she peeked at the crowd. People were excited, loud, full of energy. Her mouth dried instantly. She pulled back again and tried to swallow her nervousness, but it only grew heavier. She wondered if she made a mistake signing up for this talent show. Actually, she hadn't signed up. Her best friend, Mira, did it for her. Mira was the opposite of her bold, outgoing, always convinced Lina had more potential than she would ever admit. But Myra wasn't here tonight. She was stuck at work, unable to get her shift covered, so Lena had to face this alone. The performer on stage finished with a big flourish, and the crowd broke into loud applause. The host walked forward again, a little breathless from laughing at his own jokes. "All right, everyone. Up next, we have Lena Rivers." The name echoed through the speakers. Her stomach turned. This was it. The stagehand pulled the curtain open, just enough for her to step out. Lena hesitated for a long second. Her legs felt heavy, almost frozen in place. But she forced herself forward, one foot after the other. As she walked out into the lights, she squinted, blinking at the brightness. The sudden shift made her wobble for a moment. Then the laughter began. It wasn't cruel at first, more like quick snickers and soft chuckles. But to someone already trembling, it felt like a wave crashing into her. The teenagers in the front row nudged each other and laughed openly. Couple of people in the back exchanged looks that said everything. She doesn't belong here. Lena's cheeks grew warm. She stared at the floor, wishing she could fade into the stage and disappear. Her old karaoke machine sat on a stool beside her. It was bulky, scratched, and clearly outdated. She knew the other performers had brought polished backing tracks, microphones, even small instruments. But this was all she had. She saved for months just to replace the broken chord. Someone in the audience muttered, "Is she serious?" Followed by more quiet laughter. Lena swallowed hard, trying not to let her face show the hurt she felt spreading inside. The host gave her an encouraging smile. but even that felt distant. She reached for the karaoke machine with shaky fingers. When she tried to plug in the microphone, her hand trembled so badly she dropped the cord. A few people laughed again. The sound sliced through her like a cold blade. She bent down quickly to pick it up, wishing her hair could hide her entire face. All she wanted was a moment of quiet, a moment where no one was watching or judging. But there was no escape now. She could feel every set of eyes on her. Her voice almost cracked as she tried to test the mic. The sound came out thin, hesitant. The audience reacted with restless shifting and impatient sighs. A couple of people checked their phones. Someone whispered too loudly, "This is going to be painful." Lena felt her throat close. Her vision blurred just slightly, not enough to cry, but enough to fear she might. She had pictured this moment so differently. She imagined walking out confidently, imagined the crowd giving her a chance. She imagined hearing her father's voice in her head, telling her he was proud. But all she felt now was embarrassment. That heavy, suffocating feeling of being misunderstood and underestimated. It wasn't new. She had felt it many times growing up, when teachers overlooked her, when kids ignored her, when adults assumed she didn't have much to offer. She exhaled shakily. Maybe she should give up. Maybe Myra was wrong. Maybe she wasn't meant for this. For a moment, the idea of walking off stage and slipping out through the side door tempted her more than anything. But then something shifted. It was small, barely noticeable, like a spark under ashes. She heard her father's words again, not loudly, but soft like a memory rising to the surface. If you don't show the world who you are, they'll decide for you. Her hands were still shaking, but she tightened her grip on the microphone. She lifted her head just enough to look at the audience, at the same people who had laughed at her, and even though fear still weighed on her, there was something stronger beneath it, something that refused to let her walk away. The audience quieted a little, sensing something had changed. Lena pressed the button on her karaoke machine. A soft instrumental began to play, filling the room with gentle notes. She took one more breath. A deep, steady one. Then, standing in the bright lights with dozens of eyes still on her, she prepared to do the one thing she had always been afraid to do. She opened her mouth to sing. Lena had never been someone who stood out. Even as a child, she blended into the quiet corners of her small town, moving softly through life like she was afraid to disturb the air around her. While other kids ran loudly through the neighborhood, she spent her time sitting under the big oak tree in her yard, listening to the wind push through the leaves. That was her comfort: small sounds, soft places, gentle moments. People didn't exactly ignore her, but they didn't pay much attention either. Teachers often forgot to call her name during roll call. Classmates rarely remembered to include her in games. When she did speak up, her voice was so soft that people leaned in, confused, asking her to repeat herself. She got used to being the quiet one, but she wasn't born shy. Her mother used to say Lena was full of light when she was very young. She would laugh easily, talk to anyone, and sing made-up songs around the house. But things changed as she grew older slowly at first, then all at once. Her mother left when Lena was 8. No long explanations, no dramatic goodbye. Just a short note and an empty closet. After that, the house felt colder. Her father tried his best to fill both roles, but grief has a way of making people quieter, and Lena learned to match his silence. They grew close in a way only two lonely people can. He worked long hours, but every night they ate dinner together at their small kitchen table. They talked about simple things: the weather, her school day, the stray cat that visited their porch. And sometimes, when he was tired and the day had been hard, he would ask her to sing. Her voice wasn't loud, but it was warm. And in those evenings, her father would close his eyes and listen like her singing was the only thing keeping him from falling apart. He told her over and over that she had a gift, something rare. But Lena never believed him. Not because she thought he was lying, but because she thought he only said kind things out of love. As she grew older, she learned to hide her voice. She hummed quietly while stocking shelves at the market. She whispered melodies only when she was sure no one else was around. Singing became something private, personal, like a soft blanket she wrapped around herself when the world felt too sharp. It wasn't until her father got sick that her music changed. In the last months of his life, she spent every night in the chair beside his bed, singing to help him sleep. Those moments were heavy and tender at the same time. She could see the pain in his face, but when she sang, the lines softened. He would reach out a weak hand and rest it on hers, grounding both of them. He never told her to be brave. He never gave speeches about following dreams. Instead, he said things like, "Your voice feels honest," or "You sound like hope on a tired day." Simple words, but they stayed with her. When he passed away, the house grew painfully quiet. The silence used to feel comforting, but now it felt empty, like a room missing its center. Lena found herself singing less and less, afraid that every note would remind her of him. She packed away his belongings slowly, one drawer at a time, until she found the old notebook he used to keep by his bedside. Inside, he had written little thoughts, reminders, and short messages. On the last page, in shaky handwriting, he had written, "One day, show the world what I already see in you." Lena cried for hours after reading that. She pressed the notebook to her chest, wishing she could hear his voice again. But even during her grief, she didn't know how to do what he asked. Showing the world felt too big, too frightening. Months went by in a blur. She worked long shifts, spent evenings alone, and tried not to think too much. That's when Mira entered her life, a burst of color in a world that had turned gray. Myra worked the morning shift at the market whenever Lena worked evenings. They crossed paths often, exchanging small conversations that slowly grew into real friendship. Mira wasn't loud or wild, just warm and confident. She had a way of making Lena feel like she belonged somewhere. One day, when the store was slow and the aisles were empty, Mira heard Lena humming while restocking the bread shelf. She stopped mid-step. "Was that you?" she asked. Lena froze. I didn't mean to be loud." Myra shook her head. "Loud? You're softer than a breeze. But your voice? Wow, it's beautiful." Lena blushed, embarrassed. "I just do it out of habit." "You should sing for people," Myra said. "Seriously." Lena laughed, a tiny nervous sound. "No, I'm not that good." Myra leaned against the shelf with a grin. "You are. You just don't know it yet." But Lena brushed it off. Compliments always made her uncomfortable. She felt like she didn't deserve them. Still, Myra brought it up every few weeks. "There's a talent show coming up, you know," she'd say casually. "Might be fun." Lena always shook her head. "Not for me." Then one day, Myra showed up at Lena's door with a wide smile and a crumpled flyer in her hand. "Guess what? You're signed up." Lena nearly choked. "You what?" "You're performing," Myra said with a proud grin. "Your name's already on the list. No backing out. This is your moment." "Myra, I can't." "Yes, you can," her friend insisted. "I believe in you, even if you don't." Lena felt overwhelmed, but she didn't have the heart to undo something Myra did out of love. Besides, part of her, though small and shy, wondered if maybe, just maybe, her father was right. But now, standing on the stage with dozens of strangers staring at her, she questioned everything. She remembered the days when she and her father would sit on the old couch singing together. He would tap his foot off beat, pretending to be her drummer. He would laugh whenever she stumbled on a note, saying, "Mistakes mean you're trying." She remembered the feeling of singing by his bedside, watching his shoulders relax, seeing the pain ease just a little. And she remembered the notebook, the message she left behind. She held on to those memories, now like life rafts. They were the only things keeping her from sinking into the fear that threatened to swallow her. The laughter from the audience earlier played on repeat in her mind. She could still hear the chuckles, the whispers, the sighs of impatience. It wasn't fair. They didn't know her story. They didn't know what this moment meant to her. To them, she was just another nervous girl wearing a cheap dress and holding an old karaoke machine. But she was more than that. She thought of her father's quiet strength, of Myra's loud confidence, of all the nights she sang alone in her room when the world felt too heavy. She thought of how far she had come just to stand here. Her hands were still trembling, but her heart felt different. Now, like a door, had opened just enough to let some of the light back in. Lena took a slow breath, the kind her father used to guide her through. In through the nose, out through the mouth. She felt her chest loosen slightly. The music from the karaoke machine filled the stage with soft, calming notes. She lifted her head again, not fully, but enough to see the first few rows. Some faces still looked amused. Some looked bored. But a few had changed. A few people were watching her with curiosity, like they weren't sure what to expect anymore. Maybe that was enough. Maybe she didn't need everyone to believe in her. Maybe she just needed one small moment of courage. The lights felt less harsh now, more like a warm blanket wrapping around her. Her pulse slowed. Her breathing steadied. She adjusted her grip on the microphone and remembered something her father once said while she was practicing in the kitchen. He had smiled at her and said, "Sing like the world isn't watching. That's when you're truest." She whispered those words now under her breath. The audience waited. The music played. The air felt thick with possibility. Lena closed her eyes. And for the first time that night, she felt ready to let her voice be heard. The music had only just begun, but Lena could already feel her nerves trying to pull her backward, like invisible hands gripping her shoulders. She stood frozen for a moment, microphone in hand, as the soft melody flowed around her. Her breathing was shallow again. The weight of every stare in the room pressed down on her chest. Her voice wanted to hide. Her fear wanted her to turn away. A tiny part of her wished she could run backstage, grab her coat, and disappear into the night before the first note escaped her lips. But something inside her whispered, just as softly as the music, that she couldn't run, not this time. She had done enough running in her life. From attention, from expectations, from the small voice inside her that said she might be capable of more. Still, the doubt was strong. So strong that for a moment, it felt like she might give in. Her eyes opened just a crack, and she saw them, the people who had laughed when she walked out. Some had wiped smiles off their faces, but a few still whispered. The teenagers in the front row leaned forward like they were watching a scene from a comedy show. The older man a few seats back tapped his foot impatiently. A woman in the middle crossed her arms tightly across her chest. That wasn't that these people were cruel. They were just used to entertainment. They expected confidence, polish, excitement. And Lina, with her worn dress, shaky hands, and outdated karaoke machine, didn't look like someone who belonged on a bright stage. Her throat tightened. She looked down at her hands. They were trembling again. Maybe she wasn't ready. She thought of turning her back to the audience and signaling the host. He would understand. People had withdrawn from the show before. The crowd would forget her by the next performance. She would go home, change into her old pajamas, and pretend none of this ever happened. She almost took a step backward. But then something familiar brushed against her thoughts, her father's voice. Not a memory of him speaking, but the feeling of his presence when he used to listen to her sing at night. She remembered how his eyes softened, how the corners of his mouth lifted even on his hardest days. He never cared about perfection. He cared about honesty. With that thought, she forced herself to take a slow, steady breath. The music swelled a little, reminding her that time was moving, whether she was ready or not. She needed to start. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. She swallowed, tried again, and this time a quiet note slipped from her throat. It wasn't steady. It wasn't strong. It wavered like a candle in the wind. A small ripple went through the audience. Heads tilted. Someone whispered, but Lena didn't stop. She couldn't. She shaped the next word, then the next, each one trembling but real. Her voice was fragile, like thin glass, but it carried a kind of softness that wrapped itself around the melody. The crowd didn't laugh this time. They didn't clap either. They simply watched. Her voice cracked slightly halfway through the first verse. It wasn't loud, but it was enough to send a jolt of embarrassment through her body. Her hands tensed. Her breath hitched. She felt the doubt rising again. See? You're not ready. You're going to embarrass yourself. Her chest tightened as the thought took shape. Her throat closed a little, making the next note feel impossible. She squeezed her eyes shut, hoping it would help her block out everything, every stare, every quiet judgment. But something surprising happened. The image that filled her mind wasn't the audience or the stage or the bright lights. It was her father sitting on the old couch, tapping his foot off beat, looking at her with that patient smile. He always listened like nothing in the world mattered except the sound of her voice. And in that moment, it felt like he was there with her. Her breath loosened again. Her shoulders relaxed just slightly. The knot in her throat unraveled enough for her to continue. The next line came out smoother, warmer. Still quiet, but carried by something deeper than before. She didn't open her eyes yet. She didn't want to see the room. She wanted to stay in that memory for as long as she could, as long as it helped her get through the song. As she continued singing, something in her voice changed. It wasn't louder, but it gained a gentleness that drew the attention of even the most distracted listeners. The people who had been whispering grew quiet. The teenagers in the front row sat back, no longer smirking. Her voice wasn't perfect. It trembled often. But there was truth in it, truth shaped by years of loneliness, love, loss, and all the things she had never dared to say out loud. Midway through the verse, she opened her eyes again. At first, the brightness of the stage lights made her blink, and the audience was only a blurry shape. But as her vision cleared, she saw faces. Real faces. Some looked surprised. Some looked thoughtful. But none looked like they were laughing. That alone gave her the strength to breathe deeper. The music moved toward a delicate part, and she followed it carefully, like stepping across thin ice. Her voice wavered, but didn't break. She felt her heartbeat sinking with the rhythm, steadying with each passing moment. This wasn't confidence. She didn't suddenly become fearless. She was scared every second she stood there. But she kept singing anyway. And something about that decision, even as small as it was, felt like a victory. As she reached the end of the verse, the melody softened. She lifted her chin just slightly, enough to look at the crowd clearly. This time, she didn't just see strangers. She saw people who were listening. She moved into the next lines, feeling her voice warm up, growing bit by bit. For the first time since stepping on stage, she felt a hint of something she hadn't felt in years, a spark of belonging. It didn't last long. The karaoke machine sputtered, just for a second, just long enough for the sound to skip. The sudden glitch made her voice hang in the air awkwardly. She froze again. Her stomach dropped. A few audience members shifted in their seats, confused. She pressed a hand to the side of the machine, hoping the little tap would fix it. The old device hummed uncertainly, then steadied again. Her heart raced wildly. The moment had shaken her more than she expected. She felt her face warming, the embarrassment creeping back. "You're messing up. Again. Everyone can see it." Her breath grew uneven. The pressure in her chest returned. For a brief moment, she thought she might break. But then, from somewhere deep in her memory, she remembered another moment, one she hadn't thought about in years. She was 12, singing in the kitchen while her father cooked dinner. She had hit a bad note so bad she immediately stopped, embarrassed. But her father had laughed softly and said, "It doesn't matter how you start or stumble. Just finish with your heart." Those words wrapped around her like a warm hand on her back. She took a breath, a fuller one. And even though her hands were still shaking, she stepped a little closer to the microphone. She sang again. This time, the notes carried more emotion, shaped by the fear she had just faced. Her voice wasn't perfect, but it was brave. The audience leaned in unconsciously, drawn in by the rawness of her tone. The teenagers stopped whispering. A woman in the third row lowered her crossed arms. Even the impatient man sat back, eyebrows raised. Lena didn't notice any of this. Her focus was wrapped tightly around the song, each line a small step forward, each note another piece of the fear falling away. Her voice rose gently with the melody, never loud, but filled with something that didn't need volume to be heard. She wasn't trying to impress anyone anymore. She wasn't trying to survive the moment. She was simply singing, and for the first time on stage, she wasn't doing it out of fear. She was doing it out of love. Love for her father. Love for the memories. Love for the little part of herself she had protected for so long. The crowd watched in silence. The final notes of the verse floated into the air, soft and delicate, then faded with the music. Lena held the microphone with both hands, breathing slowly. Her eyes still open now. She had made it through. She wasn't finished yet. The song still had a long way to go, but she had passed the moment of doubt. She had chosen to continue, and everything inside her pulled her to stop. And that small choice changed everything. She didn't know what the audience was thinking. She didn't know if anyone admired her courage or felt moved by her voice. But she knew something she had never known before. She was stronger than her fear. And now that she had taken the first step, she was ready, truly ready to keep going. The backstage hallway felt quieter than usual that afternoon, as if the building itself sensed that something important was about to happen. The girl walked slowly, taking her time, almost afraid to break the stillness around her. She held her practice bag close to her chest, the strap worn and faded from years of use. Her shoes made a soft tapping sound on the old wooden floor, and each tap echoed just a little too loudly, reminding her just how small she still felt inside. She had spent the morning practicing every line of her new piece, not because someone asked her to, but because she felt it was something she had to give her whole heart to. The second performance had opened a door inside her, a door she had kept locked for years. Now, walking toward the rehearsal room, she wasn't sure what she would find on the other side. Maybe more fear, maybe more hope, maybe both. She paused at the door, took a slow breath, and pushed it open. Inside, a few people were talking quietly, setting things up for the afternoon session. There were chairs stacked in the corner, a small table with water bottles and notebooks, and a dim yellow light that always made the room look older than it really was. The girl looked around, unsure if she should call out or just wait for someone to notice her. It didn't take long. One of the older performers, a calm man with gentle eyes, walked over to her. He wasn't loud or dramatic like some of the others. He never tried to show off. Instead, he always carried himself with a soft confidence, the kind that came from years of learning and listening. "You're here early," he said with a warm smile. She nodded. I wanted to practice a bit before everyone else came. He gestured toward the center of the room. Go ahead. The space is yours. She thanked him quietly and walked to the middle. She set down her bag and took out her small notebook, the one she always used to write her thoughts, ideas, and little reminders. The pages were filled with messy handwriting, crossed-out lines, and small doodles in the margins. It wasn't perfect, but it was hers. She took her starting position and closed her eyes. For a moment, she allowed herself to remember the sound of the audience's laughter the night she walked on stage for the first time. She remembered the sting, the pressure, the doubt that almost crushed her. Then she remembered the silence that followed her performance. The kind of silence that comes only when people feel something deeply. She let those memories settle in her chest. Not to hurt her, but to guide her. Then she began. Her voice started soft. Shaky at first, but it grew steadier with each word. She moved through the lines she had practiced, trying to pour emotion into each pause, each breath. She didn't want to just say words, she wanted to live them. She wanted people to feel what she felt, to connect with her even if they didn't know her story. A few minutes later, she finished the piece. She opened her eyes and saw the older man watching her from the side with an expression she couldn't quite read. How was it? She asked, feeling her heart thump a little faster. He walked closer. It was honest, he said. Very honest. She lowered her gaze. Was it good enough? He tilted his head. That depends. Good enough for who? She bit the inside of her lip. For the show. He nodded slowly, then said, It's getting there. But don't aim for good enough. Aim for something real. Real reaches people more than perfect ever could. She let his words sink in. Real, not perfect. She thought about how much of her life she had spent trying to be perfect grades, perfect smile, perfect silence when things hurt too much to talk about. But real was different. Real was alive. The door opened again, and more performers shuffled in, carrying their bags and chatting about their day. The room slowly filled with a soft buzz of energy and movement. The girl took a few steps back, letting others take their places. She didn't mind. She had already gotten what she came for got as the session began. The instructor entered the room, wearing her usual black outfit and carrying a small tablet. She looked around at the group, her eyes sharp but fair. Today, the instructor announced, we're going to work on something different. You will each perform a short piece, and instead of giving you notes first, I want your fellow performers to share what they felt. There were a few surprised glances, but everyone nodded. The girl felt her pulse quicken. She wasn't afraid of performing anymore, not in the same way as before, but the idea of the others. Analyzing her work made her nervous. She wondered if they would see her heart the way the audience had. One by one, performers took turns showing their pieces. Some were confident, projecting their voices loudly, while others were more reserved, almost whispering. Some focused on movement, letting their bodies tell the story. Others relied on strong words or emotional expressions. The girl watched each performance closely, not judging, but learning. She liked seeing how different people shared their stories. It reminded her that there wasn't just one right way to create something meaningful. When her turn came, she stepped forward quietly. The room felt smaller now, warmer, as if the air itself expected something important. She began her piece again, but this time it felt different. She spoke slower, letting each word land softly. Her voice carried a calm strength, not loud, but steady. She didn't force emotions. They came naturally, shaped by the memories she had carried for so long. When she finished, the room stayed silent for a moment. She looked around nervously, unsure what that meant. Then one of the younger performers raised her hand. Your voice, she said softly. It felt like you were telling a story you've lived. not just something you memorized. Another performer added, "It made me feel something. I don't know exactly what, but it stayed with me." The girl felt her chest warm with relief. The instructor nodded. "That," she said, "is what makes a performance memorable." The girl thanked them quietly and stepped back. The rest of the session passed quickly. There were laughs, moments of frustration, small victories, and lessons learned. By the time it ended, the sun outside had already dipped low, leaving a soft golden glow through the windows. As the group packed up, the instructor approached her. "You've grown a lot," she said gently. "More than you realize." The girl lowered her eyes. "I'm trying." "You're doing more than trying. You're opening up." "That's not easy." The girl hesitated before asking, "Do you think I'll be ready for the next show?" The instructor smiled. "Not only will you be ready, you'll surprise them again." Those words stayed with her long after she left the building. She stepped outside into the cool evening air. The sky was a soft mix of purple and gold, and the breeze carried the faint scent of blooming flowers. For the first time in a long while, she felt something she hadn't felt before. Hope, the fragile kind that breaks easily, but a slightly stronger kind, the kind that grows quietly. Waiting for the right moment to shine. As she walked home, she held her notebook close. She already knew what she would do later that night. She would write. Not because someone told her to, not because she needed to memorize lines, but because the words inside her finally wanted to find a place to belong, and she was ready to let them. She didn't know what the future held. She didn't know how the next show would go, or how people would react. But she knew one thing for certain. She wasn't the same girl who walked on stage that first night. She was becoming someone stronger, someone braver, someone who could face laughter and still rise. And her journey, though far from over, was finally moving towards something brighter, something she could call her own. The evening sun was beginning to fade when she reached the old rehearsal building again. It stood quietly at the end of the narrow street, its windows glowing with the soft light of the lamps inside. The familiar scent of dust, wood, and faint perfume drifted out every time someone opened the door. She paused outside for a moment, drawing a slow breath, preparing herself for what would happen next. Her next performance was only a few days away. Word had spread quickly since her last show how the quiet girl who once got laughed at had brought an entire room to tears. People she didn't even know had begun talking about her. Some said she was talented. Others wondered if her first success was just luck. A few even questioned whether she could repeat that magic again. All of that noise reached her ears, but instead of crushing her, it only made her more determined. She pushed open the door and stepped inside. The room was busier than usual. People moved around, practicing lines, stretching, humming melodies to warm up their voices. There was a mix of excitement and tension in the air, the kind that always came before a big event. The girl slipped into her usual spot near the back corner. She didn't like drawing attention to herself. Not yet, at least. She took out her notebook and opened it to the page where she had written her newest piece. The ink was slightly smudged from the many times she had touched the words. As if trying to pull emotion directly from the paper. As she read through the lines, someone tapped her shoulder gently. She turned to see the older performer, the calm man who had encouraged her before. He had a kind smile on his face, the kind that always made her feel a little safer. "Big week coming up?" he said softly. She nodded. "I know. How are you feeling?" She hesitated. Nervous, but also ready, I think. He motioned to the notebook. "Mind if I hear a little of what you've been working on?" She froze for a second. She wasn't sure she wanted anyone to hear it yet, but she also trusted him. So she nodded. She read the first few lines out loud, her voice steady but gentle. The words were simple, but they carried weight. She wasn't trying to create something fancy. She just wanted to tell a story that came from a true place inside her. When she finished, the older performer didn't say anything at first. Then, after a long moment, he whispered, "That feels real." She lowered her eyes shyly. "I hope the audience feels that too." "They will," he said firmly. "Because when something comes from the heart, people can sense it." Before she could respond, the instructor called everyone together. "We are entering the final preparation days," the instructor announced, her voice strong and clear. "From today on, you will perform your pieces as if the audience is already here. No holding back." A few people murmured under their breath. It was clear that the pressure was rising. "You," the instructor said, pointing at one of the more experienced performers, "will start." One by one, people took the center of the room. Some delivered powerful speeches, others performed dramatic scenes, and a few tried lighter pieces filled with humor or charm. The room shifted with every performance, the energy rising and falling like waves. When the girl's turn finally came, she stepped into the middle slowly. The lights overhead buzzed softly, casting a warm glow around her. She could feel all eyes on her, not in a mocking way like before, but in a curious, expectant way. They wanted to see what she would do next. She took a breath and began. Her voice was calmer than she expected. She didn't push it. She didn't force emotion. She simply let the words flow the way they had come to her late at night when she wrote them. The room quieted, and she could sense that the others were listening, not just hearing her, but listening. She reached the end of her piece with a soft final line. For a moment, there was silence. Then the instructor spoke. "That," she said slowly, "was honest. You are learning to open yourself, and that is something not everyone here can do yet." A warm feeling spread through the girl's chest. She looked down, trying not to smile too widely, but the corners of her mouth still lifted. After the session ended, she walked home under a sky that was turning dark blue. Street lights flickered on one by one, casting long shadows on the pavement. She held her notebook close, as she always did, but tonight she felt lighter. That night, she sat by her bedroom window with the notebook open in front of her. The moonlight spilled through the glass, soft and silver, touching the pages gently. She reread her piece, making small adjustments, rewriting little moments to make them clearer, smoother, more natural. Her mind drifted back to her first performance, the laughter, the doubt, the fear that had almost swallowed her whole. She had come so far from that moment. Every step, every tear, every shaky breath had led her to this point. She reminded herself that it didn't matter if people compared her to others. It didn't matter if some doubted her. What mattered was that she had something inside her worth sharing. The next morning, she returned to the building again. This time, it felt different. There was excitement in her steps. She was starting to trust herself more. Inside, she noticed that people greeted her with more warmth. Someone waved. Someone else complimented her performance from the day before. The girl wasn't used to attention, but she accepted their kindness with quiet gratitude. As the days passed, rehearsals grew more intense. The instructor pushed them harder. There were moments when the girl felt tired, moments when frustration crept into her thoughts. But every time she wanted to give up, she reminded herself of the look on the audience's faces during her last show, the silence, the stillness, the connection. She wanted to feel that again. She wanted to give that again. On the final rehearsal day before the show, the instructor gathered everyone for a talk. "You have all worked hard," she said. "But remember, this audiences don't remember every word you say. They remember how you made them feel. They remember the truth behind your performance. So go on that stage with courage. Go with honesty." The girl held on to those words tightly. When rehearsal ended, the older performer approached her one last time. "I've seen many people perform over the years," he said gently. "Some are loud, some are bold, some are technically perfect. But very few have the ability to make people feel quietly. You have that." She looked up at him, taken aback. "Do you really think so?" He nodded. "I do. So don't try to be bigger. Don't try to be someone else. Be exactly who you are. That's what moved them before. That's what will move them again." Those words settled in her heart like a warm blanket. When she walked home that evening, the world felt different, not because anything around her had changed, but because something inside her her confidence wasn't loud. It wasn't bold. It was quiet and steady, like a small flame that refused to go out. That night, she sat on her bed with her notebook open one last time. She didn't rewrite anything. She didn't question anything. She simply read the piece slowly, letting every word sink into her. Tomorrow. She would walk onto that stage again, not tomorrow. She would face another audience. Tomorrow. She would give them her heart, just like before. And this time, she wasn't afraid of their laughter. She was ready, truly ready, to make them feel something real again. The journey back to town was quiet, filled with the weight of the discovery they had just made. The chest was now safely in their hands, but it felt as though it contained more than just objects and letters. It held the essence of a long-forgotten story, a story that had been waiting to be uncovered for decades. The group walked in a slow procession, their steps almost synchronized, as if they were all aware that this moment would change everything. The town of Briar Hill seemed unchanged as they made their way back through the streets. The old buildings, the quiet homes, and the familiar faces all looked the same as they had before the mystery began. But for those who had uncovered the secret of the piano, everything felt different. The weight of the past hung in the air, and the knowledge they carried with them now felt like a thread that connected the present with a forgotten time. When they returned to the hall, they carefully set the chest down in the center of the room. The piano sat in the corner, looking as unassuming as ever, but it was no longer just an old instrument. It was part of a bigger story, and now everyone in the town would know it as the group gathered around the chest. The historian felt a wave of emotion. She had always been drawn to the past, to the stories that people had left behind, but this was different. This wasn't just an old document or an artifact. It was a piece of the town's soul. The piano, the letters, and the photograph were all part of a deeper connection, a bond that had been lost but now had been found again. Someone in the group spoke first. "We need to share this with the town. Everyone needs to know what we've uncovered." There was a moment of hesitation, as if everyone was thinking the same thing. This was a story that belonged to the whole town, not just the small group who had stumbled upon it. But sharing it also meant revealing something that might change how people saw their town, how they saw themselves. "Do you think they'll understand?" someone asked. "I don't know," the historian replied. "But this is part of our history. It's something that has been hidden for too long." And with that, they made the decision. It was time to tell the story. The group spent the next few days preparing. They wanted to make sure the story was told right. The chest, the letters, and the photograph would be displayed in the town hall for everyone to see. They would invite everyone, families, elders, even the children, to come and learn about the forgotten history that had been buried under layers of time. The piano would remain in its corner, now a symbol of connection between past and present. As the evening approached, the townspeople began to gather. The hall filled with murmurs of curiosity. Some had heard whispers about what had been found, but most of them had no idea what the group was about to reveal. The historian, standing at the front of the room, looked out at the faces in the crowd. She felt a nervousness rise in her chest, but also a sense of pride. This was something important. This was the moment when the story would finally be told. She cleared her throat and began. It started with the discovery of an old piano, she said, her voice steady. An instrument that had been sitting forgotten in the town hall for years. But when we opened it, we found something much more than we expected. Inside, we found a map and a letter that spoke of something much bigger, something tied to the very heart of our town. She paused for a moment, letting her words sink in. The room was silent, everyone listening intently. We followed the map, and it led us to a place in the hills. There we uncovered a chest. Inside, we found letters, objects, and a photograph that told a story. The story of a family who lived here many years ago, a family whose music had brought people together, and who had hidden something important, something that belonged to everyone in this town. The historian then explained everything they had, discovered the mysterious family, the piano, and the significance of the symbol they had seen everywhere. She spoke of the photograph, the woman and the man who had been part of the family, and how they had left behind a legacy that had been passed down through generations. The townspeople listened in stunned silence. It was a story unlike any they had ever heard before, a story that connected them to a past they had no idea existed. There were whispers, nods of recognition, and a few tears in the crowd. The historian's words had opened a door to something they had never fully understood. "We don't know everything," she said as she finished her story. "But what we do know is that the piano, the music, and the family were all part of something bigger. They were trying to create a bond, something that would help people understand where they came from. And now it's our turn to carry that legacy forward." The room was still for a moment, as if everyone was absorbing what they had just heard. Then, someone in the back of the room stood up. It was an elderly man, one of the town's oldest residents. "I remember," he said, his voice shaky but filled with conviction. "I remember the piano. I remember the music." The room fell silent again as the man spoke. He told the crowd about the days when the piano had been played regularly in the town hall, how the music had brought people together. He remembered the family who had once lived here, the family who had been so kind and so full of life. He talked about the piano as if it were a part of his own memories. "I was just a boy back then," he continued, "but I remember the way it felt when the music filled the room. It was like everything was right in the world. And then, one day, they were gone. Nobody ever knew what happened to them. But I always wondered." He trailed off, his voice heavy with the weight of years. The historian stepped forward and placed a hand on his shoulder. "You weren't the only one," she said softly. "None of us knew. But now we do." The man nodded slowly, tears in his eyes. I'm glad that the story is finally being told." The crowd was quiet for a moment, each person processing the story in their own way. The historian looked out at the faces in the crowd, and for the first time, she felt a deep connection to them. The mystery that had been buried for so long was no longer just a secret. It was part of their shared history. And then, someone in the back raised their hand. "What happens now?" they asked. The historian smiled, knowing that the answer was simple. "Now," she said, "we carry the legacy forward. The music, the story, the bond that was created all those years ago. We honor it by remembering and by sharing it with the next generation." As the crowd began to disperse, there was a sense of peace in the air. The mystery had been solved, but it wasn't just the answers that mattered. It was the way the town had come together to uncover the truth. The piano, once forgotten, had now become a symbol of connection, of history, and of the power of music to bring people together. The historian stood in the center of the hall, looking around at the faces of the townspeople. She felt a sense of pride that she had never known before. This wasn't just her story, or the story of the group who had uncovered the mystery. It was the town's story, a story that had been waiting to be told. And with that, the forgotten grand piano, once hidden in the shadows, had finally revealed its secrets. The town of Briar Hill would never be the same again. The mystery had ended, but the legacy would live on forever.